Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are going to be talking about college, the planning process for when you're trying to think about, okay, what do I have to do before college kind of comes on the radar? And then also the hacking of how do you reduce the cost, or how do you treat it differently once you're there than the traditional college student does? Because we do know student loans are such a big issue in this country, and it's an evolving issue. And we have a wonderful panel tonight who are going to talk to us about that. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves. We are waiting on one more panelist who is hopefully going to join us tonight. And once we do, I'll flash up names and all that stuff. But I guess to my right, left, I don't know what you guys see, but Stephen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Steven. I work for ChooseFI and ChooseFI International Foundation. I'm an active duty Air Force pilot out of Philadelphia. I'm really excited to be here. My college experience was definitely abnormal. And I'm excited to jump into this topic with this great group.
Awesome. Meagan, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm Meagan Landress. I'm with Student Loan Planner out of Atlanta, Georgia. My bread and butter is helping people navigate their student loan repayment plan and finding the way to tackle that post-graduation. So I'm looking forward to nerding out with everybody on the loan side of it.
And Brian, look at that. We were just talking about how many financial people are in Atlanta. And here's another one. Brian Eufinger, tell us about you.
Yeah, I'm Brian Eufinger. I also live in Atlanta, Georgia. My wife and I are the two co-founders of Edison Prep, which is a SAT, ACT preparation and college planning firm here in Atlanta. And it used to be Atlanta only, and COVID changed things. So we renovated our office. You can't see in the background. So now I think we had students in 27 states the last 6 months. So lots of cousins and whatnot. So COVID changed everything.
All right. So, and my name, for everyone who doesn't know, is Rob Phelan. I work with ChooseFI Foundation as part of their curriculum writing team. We have a pre-K through 12 personal finance curriculum that is free for any educator, homeschool parent, or parent to use. And then Stephen works with the foundation as well, doing our FI 101, which is our adult education course. So all free content, all wonderful content if you're looking to learn more about personal finance. But we're going to kick things off with college tonight. So we've had a lot of different events so far. If you're interested in any of our past events, you can find them at choosefi.com/events. We also have, Stephen, how many do we have left to go? I'd say three, maybe four?
Yeah, three. No, we have three more.
Okay, so we've got three more to come after this. Some great events. You can find all of those at ChooseFIFoundation.org/events. And sign up to get notifications when those events go live, like tonight. It's every Tuesday at 8 p.m. But our first topic is going to be, when should we actually start thinking about college? Brian, I'll start with you. When do you think we should start having a thought about college?
Yeah, so the 800-pound gorilla that determines everything is actually math. So the only is let your kid be a kid, ride bikes, enjoy life. I get phone calls all the time. My fourth grader, click, go away, enjoy childhood, etc. With one exception. A lot of parents coddling in a good way, they're being protective, like you should be as a parent. The math track that your kid is on can determine a lot of things because it ripples. And so when your kid, if they can handle it, is offered in middle school a higher math track, if they can handle it, then do it. And I'm from Atlanta, and I'll use this example. It's not my joke, it's their joke. In Georgia Tech, which is a great engineering school, not everyone wants to be an engineer, but they say at Georgia Tech, 98.5% of kids that we admit took calculus, and 1.5% of the student body is the football team. Their joke, not mine. But the point is, a parent unknowingly, if a kid is going to have some possibly aggressive ambitions or want majors like some of the high-end business STEM stuff, it's important to make sure that you talk with your school's administration to make sure if you at least that it's an option that you can be on a high enough math track that you can have calculus in high school. There's ways to fix it. We have parents who made an oops, who take a community college class and get caught up whether their district likes it or not. There's ways to fix it. But honestly, that's about the only mistake. I mean, so Meagan will talk in a minute about financial stuff, but from a curricular standpoint, that's about the only oops that we see people make prior to high school. Most of the mistakes happen after ninth grade starts from that curricular standpoint.
And it's just the math track that we really care about. Is there any other subjects that are important to include in our subject mix? Are there classes that every student should try and take? So I like that you went on track, and I do want to come back to more specific things like AP testing and CLEP and SAT and all that stuff. But Anything else in the early days?
I have a bias towards parents looking at math. So the short answer is Algebra 2 undergirds a lot of things because you look at chemistry, physics, pre-cal, to AP statistics, computer science, a lot of logically based things. That's why it's a shame if your kid if the listeners listen to this and COVID, cyber school, clown school, ate your kids Algebra 2, it is worth a couple bucks to do what you got to do, Coursera or other things, or a little bit of tutoring to get them caught up in Algebra 2. Because if you're bad at AP Psych, AP Psychology, my daughters will not be given a choice. It's an amazing class and everyone should take it, in my opinion. But AP Psych is just fun. It doesn't undergird all these other subjects throughout high school and college. So yes, that is the math track. We don't teach grammar after 6th grade in America pretty much. And so it's hard to screw it up other than making sure that you're on point from the math standpoint.
Okay. Meagan, I'm going to switch to you. So when do we start thinking about college? And from, I guess, the lens that you approach it, when would you say a parent should start thinking about it?
Yeah, it's funny, Brian. I thought when you said math track, I thought you meant like the money side of it is the first place you should think about. And I was like, yeah. But no, I get what you meant now. So on the money side of it, the simple answer is when mom and dad are financially taken care of. And that doesn't mean that we have retirement ready to go, that we have all of our ducks in a row. It really just means that we have a plan of action for mom and dad first. Because for college, we can borrow for our kids' cost of attendance. We cannot borrow for retirement. And people have probably heard that saying all the time, but it is so true to where we don't want to sacrifice getting mom and dad financially, their house in order, for a kid's college education when we can borrow for that. So I think some of the basic like ducks in a row that you want to start getting in place for just mom and dad would be, you want to make sure you have debt under control. Credit cards are the worst kinds of debt to have in the mix. Make sure we've got that under control. We have emergency savings established for the household. We've got our protection pieces in place to protect what we're building. So insurance pieces to protect ourselves or our assets. We want to start saving for retirement. So a lot of employers offer some kind of match or some kind of employer retirement benefits that we can take advantage of. We want to get started on that before we start saving for our kids' college. And I think once we have those big objectives checked off, we've got those foundational pieces underway, that's when we can start thinking about, okay, how much extra money do we have that we can start squirreling away for college? And math can be a big part of that, depending on how long we have to go until our kid gets to college age. There's only so much we can do if we're trying to focus on ourselves too, but every little bit does count. And the earlier we can get started, the better. But just making sure that we have our house in order first is the better way to go.
And so when you say our house in order and like mom and dad are taken care of first, so that's the traditional like airline metaphor, like put your own mask first before you help anyone else. How taken care of should mom and dad be? Like, we're not talking about being financially independent before you start thinking about saving for your kids' college. So I guess, is there a mark in the sand where you're like, okay, you're good now, and you can actually start thinking about your own kids too?
I think it depends for everybody. Depends on what kind of retirement a family wants for themselves or mom and dad want for themselves and for them, for their family itself. But I think number one, we have to make sure we have consumer debt out of the mix. We can't have credit card debt and be saving for our kids' college at the same time. We have to pay that off. Other consumer debt, it could probably be part of that conversation too. We have to be starting to contribute to retirement at an amount that's going to get us somewhere. So that might require talking with an investment advisor or starting to plan out your retirement and when we want to be looking at that to have an idea if you're on track or not. But it does depend on every person and what they foresee for themselves. So I don't think there's an easy answer for that. That's the hard part.
There never is. It's always, it depends. That's the standard answer for any financial question. But I appreciate your thoughts there and like trying to put some sort of like, it's not a rule of thumb, but it's just some general thoughts as to like, make sure you're checking these boxes for yourself. Make sure that you are financially, you've got a plan, you've got things in place. You've gotten rid of the really important stuff like the high interest debt. Because I mean, Stephen, I want to talk to you about that now in a second. Like when we're thinking about our blueprint of FI, Where in the ChooseFI Blueprintify does college planning come in? Is it the exact same?
Yeah, it's really similar to what Meagan said. And, Meagan said something really important about like making sure we have gotten rid of our consumer debt as parents before we save. That's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, to say like, okay, I need to be paying off this instead of putting money in the bank. But it goes back to that, like money is fungible and interest is the same on both sides of the ledger, right? So if you're putting money away and getting a fantastic, whatever, 7, 8, 10%, annual interest in an investment, but you're paying 20 or 25% on a credit card, like you're actually losing ground. You're digging your hole still. And so that is a fantastic point to foot stomp. For the road to savings that we put in FI 101, we basically say we want you to absolutely capture your company match. If you have a company match, right? Like that's free money on the table. Take that money off of the table. Whatever you're investing in is likely not going to make the same amount as just that free money that you can scrape off the table from your employer. And then beyond that, having your family safe today and tomorrow in the near term. And that looks like having an emergency fund, whatever that is, that's appropriate for your family. Typically you'll hear somewhere between 3 to 6 months. And then starting to put money into retirement vehicles, whether it's you're just a regular IRA, like a traditional or Roth IRA, or starting to put more money into 401k, 457, 403b, all of those work-related retirement plans. And I would say that once you have the plan, the budget, the savings going there, and then you start to inch up and have a little bit extra, you're getting a little pay raise, or you get some kind of end-of-year bonus, and you're looking for places to put that, that might be a great time to say, okay, I have a kid that's on the way, or we're planning on having kids, or I have a kid now. If you already have a kid, right, then you can open up some of those type of saving vehicles, whether it's 529s or something. But again, I think that Meagan makes a fantastic point of whether you're putting $1 in a 529 that's allocated for college for that kid, or you're putting $1 in your own retirement to ensure that you are taken care of once you reach retirement age, and then you use that dollar and its growth to just cash flow college or whatever that education requirement might be 18 years from now. Money is fungible, right? Like there's some benefits here, some benefits there, but really time and getting those dollars in now is what's really going to make a difference, regardless of where you put those dollars.
And I think even more so, like the equation of paying down debt versus investing, like putting money aside for a kid's college, that's actually probably not really helping your net worth in the slightest, because you're essentially saying, I'm giving this to my kid and it's going to something completely different, versus like maybe your own kid taking on their own student loan. So it's almost like that's not going to help you at all in the future. It's going to help your child, which is wonderful. But yeah, you got to take care of yourself first. All right. You brought up a lot of, I guess, jargon that I want to dive into, Stephen. And let's go there first. So how do we save for college? So the financial ways that we can do this. Meagan, I'm going to start with you. What would you say is like a way that a parent, particularly, a parent with a young child, so like Stephen has a young child, I have a young child. Brian, how old are your twins?
3.
3. So yeah, we're all in that young age. Do you have any kids, Meagan? I didn't ask you beforehand.
I do not yet.
Okay, so
she's the one that's well rested and ready to answer
thinking
questions.
Clearly.
Yes.
An unbiased opinion. Perfect. So yeah, Meagan, if you have parents of young kids who are saying, I've got my financial house in order, which I would imagine is probably the 3 of us, and we're thinking about our kids' college. We don't know if they're going to go yet. None of our kids have shown any inclination for school yet, but we're assuming that they might want to. What way would you say a parent should maybe think about starting to save for college? What are our options? What would you recommend? I guess would be a good question.
Yeah. So I think the 2 big options maybe I'll touch on. So 529 is an option. It's a college savings vehicle that you can open as a parent. A grandparent can open one of these. It's for the benefit of your child, and you can actually move the ownership of this account too. So if child 1 decides to go the military route, doesn't need college funding, you can transfer ownership of this 529 account to your next child, or another family member. So it's flexible in that sense. There are tax benefits associated with 529s. Depends on your state. It is different for every state. So definitely look at your state specifically. And then, I think the only drawback or downside to 529s is that the funds in that account have to be used for qualifying education expenses. And what if my kid does get a full ride? What if they decide not to go to college? What if I don't have another kid to transfer it to? Then we're going to be subject to penalties to pulling that money out and putting it elsewhere or using it for something that's not considered a qualifying education expense. So I really like a balance of using maybe a brokerage account or a general investing account for college savings as well, or just kind of my kid's future savings fund for whatever, because a general account is under your control. You dictate what the money goes to. It is taxable on a year-to-year basis, but that could also be your backup or additional retirement fund. That could be vacation fund. I mean, it can be used for a lot of things. That I think that's the beauty of a brokerage account. Maybe a hybrid plan of using 529 and brokerage could be a good idea too, to just give us more flexibility to where we don't have all of our eggs in that 529 when we're not sure if we're going to be using that bucket. So those are some thoughts there that I have initially.
Yeah, particularly like the brokerage account for, say, us with kids under the age of 3. Like, I guess, Stephen, our general rule will be if you're not planning to use the money in the next, 5 years, that it's pretty safe to put in the market.
Yeah, you would definitely want to put it in, what you would consider kind of a long-term investment. And the nice thing about saving for college for kids is it is one of the few things that has like a really nice time horizon, right? Like generally, we all know when our kids are going to college, and we are ushering them out the door after high school graduation towards that goal. But I did want to touch on some of the 529 stuff, which you pick these things up over time, but this might be really helpful information for some people. And so again, none of this is investment advice. None of us are CFPs or any of that. So I want you to take this information and go do some Googling and learn some more. But it's some places to start, right? Like, one interesting thing about the 529 plans is they are state specific, but you do not have to use the one where you live, right? Which blows most people's minds. So if you live in Pennsylvania, I know when my kid was born, I Googled what are the best 529 plans, and I read 6 or 7 articles where they kind of ranked them and used different criteria. And there's some really fantastic ones out there, and there's some really terrible ones, and you actually get to choose. If you are in a state that has high state taxes, that's where you might want to pay a little bit more attention about comparing your 529 plan versus some other states, because typically if you use another state's 529 plan, you won't get those tax benefits for your state, right? But it's something to pay attention to. The other thing that's really interesting about 529 plans, if you do use one, is look up what qualifies as educational expenses, right? There's some really interesting things in there. So it doesn't have to be just purely like what we think of as college. One really good example is, I believe it's $10,000 a year you can use to pay if you are going to a K through 12 school. And so there are some other ways that, if going in, I live in the Northeast now in Philadelphia. I went to public school, but up here, the public versus Catholic schools is a big rivalry. And so if that your kids are probably going to go to a private school of some type and you're going to have to pay for that, well, then, hey, that might actually be a really beneficial way to use a 529, even if it's not necessarily for college, quote unquote.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm fortunate to live in Maryland, where our 529 plan is great. And Maryland's one is awesome that if you contribute, I think it's only $150 towards it, Maryland will actually put $500 in towards your kids' 529 plan. So there's a program that they run. Now you do lose the tax benefits. So if you take advantage of that program, I don't think you can actually claim the state income tax deduction for contributing to it, but it's a great deal. If you're just I need to put in a small amount, just enough to get that 500, you're coming out ahead easily. All right, Brian, what else can you add to that? We've talked about 529s, and we've talked about maybe a brokerage savings account combo. Anything else you have come across? You're yeah, this is a great way to save for college.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff said is very accurate. I think one of the things about 529 versus a brokerage. I think the brokerage has more flexibility, and also parents. A lot of the mom Facebook groups that I'm part of and offer advice due to my stuff I do for my job. There's a lot of misunderstandings about how it's going to be held against you in certain ways and manners and percentages when calculating what's called the EFC, which is the expected family contribution. When you fill out the financial aid, FAFSA forms, or the college profile forms, there's a lot of misunderstandings. Unless you're in a crazy tax bracket or have a lot of weird situations, there's differences in the numbers. But in the end, if you have assets, you have assets. And then even then, there's some places, oh, we will not hold home equity against you, San Francisco people. Other places, oh, we will. And so there's so many nuances that it's hard to give a good answer. I will say one story that's great. A very mature individual. I encourage parents, rather than surprise kids at the end with surprise, here's the budget, you applied to these places, now you can't afford them. Start having conversations, maybe not in first grade, but maybe late middle school, early high school. It's a great motivation to start to make your kid want to work, because if they know what the rules of engagement are, because mom and dad aren't billionaires, oops, but we do want to help you how we can. Here's approximately how we think we can. If you work harder and get some merit aid, then maybe we can do the X, Y, and Z. So there's a student of ours, I'll leave the details vague enough to respect his privacy. He was really smart and he was hilarious. He was hard to keep on task when we worked together. His parents aren't from this country. He was born here, but they didn't know about 529s, whatever. Dad just basically thought they came from another country where education was considered very, very, very important. And they just socked away money because this college thing is important. And when he got in, they said, well, this is your pot of money. If you don't use it for college, you can use it for this. We don't care. We love you. And his friends were shocked that he chose an engineering school, but he got into, let's just call it some schools that are insanely hard, and got $0 and would have had to essentially drain the entire corpus of that account and then taken out a little bit of loans to do that. He also won one of those scholarships they named after some dead guy who donated a bunch of money that would pay full everything, room, board, and here's a free laptop, whatever, at a different engineering school that is still very well ranked. And he took the money, and he's like a little real estate don, where he's part of this like Christian like co-ed fraternity at the place where he is. And I ran into him over at the mall in Atlanta when he was here for his Christmas, and we chatted for like half an hour. He bought some down payments. He's pretty handy, and he now has like a sprawling little real estate network. And once he graduates, he's just going to have a discounted tenant in part of this like Christian co-ed fraternity that he's part of. And then basically, like, I don't even want to do the math because it'll make me sad, because he could probably just retire at 30 and like, but no, I mean, all from that one pivotal decision. His parents were supportive of it, and he's going to go get an engineering job doing whatever. He's probably a senior in college by now, but that is the kind of thing where the parents had that conversation. They're like, we want you to be happy, choose what you want to major in, whatever, but this is the resources we have. We don't have any more than that. This is the stuff we put away. And he worked really hard in high school and got scholarship money. And he took some crap from his friends who do not have the foresight and the vision, realizing what a life-changing event it was. Yes, it didn't have quite as cool of a bumper sticker, but it's still a very good school that he went to. And so he deserves, so many accolades. He's too shy for details. Yeah, he would say I'm being too kind, but he's an amazing kid. And then that's the kind of thing where he probably worked harder, understanding these are the parameters, because I really like to have some money to save to save up for other things, whether it be a down payment or, in his case, real estate empire. So yeah.
I mean, that's like, I work with high school seniors. So I'm a high school teacher, and I teach personal finance to seniors who are about to go out into the world. And if they had that foresight to even just make a different decision, and we're going to probably talk about this as well, like just the choice of where you go and what you sign up for is going to be a big part of this college process. But the foresight to say, all right, I don't need to go to the most prestigious school or the school that's on the beach. Like, I can take a different choice, and it's going to work out much better financially for me. And at the end of the day, there's not that many careers that are really going to care what name's on the degree. I know education is one that it does not matter. You can get your teaching diploma from an online college or a 4-year college or 2-year community, 2-year and a 4-year. Nobody cares. Once you've got that degree and you're licensed to teach, you are good to go. A couple things that weren't mentioned with the 529, you have 2 options. You can do prepay for college, or you can do a college savings plan. So if you are prepaying for college, Meagan, are you able to tell us a bit about that? Do you know much about it?
I don't know a lot about it, actually. I probably wouldn't be the best person to ask on that.
No worries. I just want to I don't want to steal the show. Is there anyone who wants to talk about that?
For a future, I'm not the right person, but for a future one, Florida is one of the places that has the most robust and longest running version of that. So if we have some people that are big names in the ChooseFI community that they'd probably be happy. If they're not the right person, they could put us in touch with, a local person that would be
sure.
Be good.
So my basic understanding of it is that if we look at the trend of college prices over the past 30 years, it's exponentially growing, and it's growing at a much faster rate than standard inflation or wages are, for that matter. So the cost of college and healthcare are two of the highest growing costs that Americans are facing. And if the current trend for the past 10 years continued, a 4-year degree, I was like running my exponential function on this with my students back in the spring, like you would be expecting to pay like anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000 for a 4-year degree if the current trend continued in 18 years. So like that's what my son might expect to pay. I don't believe in my heart that it can ever get that high, and I really hope it can't. But the idea of prepaying for college is that you lock in today's college prices and you say, I'm going to prepay for 4 years of college at a specific school. When my kid gets to college age, that's the school they go to, and it's paid for already. And then the other option is kind of what most of us think of when we think of 529. We are saving money in this account. It's invested in the market. So it is growing with the market. So in my Maryland 529 plan, my son's 529 is invested in a Vanguard S&P 500 index fund. I think that was one that was offered. It's managed by T. Rowe Price. So low cost index funds. We love index funds at ChooseFI. And hopefully by the time he's 18, there's enough in there to cover a significant chunk of his college expenses. That's kind of our goal. Some other kind of crafty ways I've seen parents save for college. And if you guys have any of these other kind of quirky ones you've heard of, please chime in. I've heard of parents doing the brokerage account thing. And then when their kid gets to like 16, 17 years old and starts working a job, they basically just take all of that brokerage money and put it into a Roth IRA for the kid. So they just match what his earnings are or her earnings are. And then when you get to college, you can start pulling that money out. But as far as I know, Meagan, Roth IRA balances are not counted towards FAFSA. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Retirement assets are not counted towards FSA or the FAFSA application because it's it's locked away. Locked away is supposed to be for retirement.
Yes, with the exception of Roths, where you can take your contributions back out. So that was, I think, the strategy that I heard of with that parent in particular. And then the other one, I think I've heard of people doing real estate, kind of like what you were suggesting, Brian, except they like buy the property ahead of time and then they let that kind of cash flow their kids' way through college. So they hopefully pay it off in 18 years. Kid gets to either sell it or it's in a college town so they can live in it for free, rent out the other rooms, and then use that to cash flow college. That's another strategy I've heard of.
I've actually had a lot of friends use that strategy. Like while I was in college, and then other colleagues have told me that they had done that or their parents had done that. And I thought that was such a cool, like unique way to pay for college. That's just my little comment there.
I think Brandon Turner did that one, right? He like bought a duplex, put it on a 15-year. So it's paid off right before they turn 18. And then the idea is like,
sounds like something Brandon would do. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember if it was Brandon. I feel like we heard that on Bigger Pockets though, but it is a fantastic idea. And I love the idea of being able to like give that to your child to also start to like get their hands dirty with some property management, right? Like it's a pretty low stakes way of getting in there and figuring out, like having some responsibility for taking care of that and managing it.
I will say one thing: early caution and runway. We have we work with about 1,400 families a year, and for whatever reason, a ton of them have real estate, or a lot of them are self-employed, or own a family business, or one of those, or multiple. There are a lot of complex situations. It's one of those places it's worth paying a couple bucks to have a person who does this day in, day out, because there's certain things you can do right or wrong if you happen to have a lot of real estate stuff going on or a family business that if you do it the wrong way can really have some pretty ridiculously bad impacts or avoid it. And like other things, I'll give you one innocent example. Forget the business owner part, but if you're listening and you fall into one of those two categories, you still should. Parents think they're going to be all cute, and on New Year's Eve, when their kid is a senior in high school, they're going to do some shenanigans and then look poor for FAFSA. There's something called, if parents are listening, you can Google what's called prior year for FAFSA. It goes back 2 years. So if you don't start getting your ducks in a row, if you're a normal family, non-business, a W-2, straight W-2 person, you still have a 2-year runway beforehand. If you have complex, weird family business stuff, it should probably be longer than that. So I've seen some people who got spanked on the first child, and then on the second one, their CPA fixed the boo-boos, and they were able to not get taken to the bank.
It's a great point that when you're talking about the FAFSA, they are not going to look at your 2021 tax returns. They're going to go back to, is it 2019 for this prior crop of seniors? Yeah. So the FAFSA opens up on October 1st, I believe. And that's when you start applying for the free application for federal student aid. And they're going to look at 2019 numbers. So thinking ahead and just trying to think about, okay, what assets are going to count towards FAFSA, which ones are not, how much are we trying to, again, not avoid paying, but how much are we expecting to get in free student aid? Those are important questions to think about beforehand. So we're starting to build a timeline here. All right, so let's go into the education side of it. Brian, I'm going to come to you about this. With regards to testings, we know that SAT, ACT testing are two big areas that you focus on with students, and it's a great way to earn merit-based aid. When do we really want to start thinking about the merit-based aid side of the equation? Is it middle school, elementary school, or is it day one of freshman year, or can it wait till junior year? When do we really have to start getting academic ducks in a row?
Right. If I were in charge, I would totally, I would love to speak at more 8th grade auditoriums, not to scare people, but because GPA starts on day one of freshman year. And some people literally by Christmas of freshman year have done some things that have rendered certain schools just off the table or cost themselves 5 or 6 figures of aid. I'll give you one statistic. I can give you some links for show notes. The short answer is most of the big stuff happens from a GPA standpoint on day one of freshman year, full stop. Grade inflation is real. Way back in my, if you were listening to this, episode 114 was a pretty good episode of ChooseFI. It's the one that Brad and Jonathan and I did, where basically we talked about how C's were classified recently by the EPA as an endangered species, because C's, you and I, we're all of a certain age. C's were definitely a thing when we were in high school. They are no longer a thing. Where UGA, University of Georgia, here in Atlanta, they published a blog post that I literally screenshotted so hard and saved it in 10 different places because I knew it to be true. But parents, it could look like I was trying to sell people. It said the act of getting, first of all, they used the word the act. The act of getting 1 C drops your odds, irrespective of everything else, drops your odds of getting into UGA, not Harvard, UGA, by 86% or so. And 2 C's, 97% or so. I have plenty of people who are very successful in the real world who got boatloads of C's in the late 90s, and that's fine. But that's the number one thing, because I have I turn down at least 10 grand of business a year where ethically, Catholic guilt, I can't. Sorry. If a kid has a 2.98 GPA and takes a mock test and gets a 29 in the ACT, we're good, because either a school is going to be good with a 298 and a 29, or even a 25 or a 21. A 298, it won't work. And so there's no need for prep on certain tests. It's a sliding scale. If you have a crazy high GPA, you can afford to have a little bit lower on the test, and vice versa. You can't be way lower on both. But as great as it would be for my wallet if SAT, ACT were the only thing that mattered, GPA, here's the comparison we make. GPA is like game film for a football player in college. You have 4 years of it, and think of APs and IB classes as what conference are you playing in. So the SEC is very hard. On the other hand, I could have been an offensive lineman at my Division III football team that I was on. So yeah, so it's the rigor as well as your 4 years of game film, so to speak, is the GPA. Whereas think of the NFL Combine. If Vanderbilt decided that they wanted to no longer get their butt kicked, they would transfer conferences out of the SEC and they'd be amazing, but they don't. And they always get their butt kicked because that's how the SEC works. So the SAT, ACT are more of a gut check, a little bit of a BS detector. Because if someone has a 4.9 GPA and gets 7 questions above randomly guessing with the book closed on the ACT, not all high schools are created equal. Some people just grade inflation to the moon. So, and that's why parents, through no fault of their own, no malice, just this GPA was good when I was in high school and I figured they're doing the right stuff. They realized too late in the game, oh crap, there's been some balls that have been dropped here. So freshman and sophomore year, to recap, freshman and sophomore year, freshman year period, all 4 years, GPA is everything, because GPA is the number one most important factor for admissions. And once you're in the second half of sophomore year is the time to start thinking about not starting to study, but starting to take mock tests, a practice test each of SAT and ACT. just to make sure to see which test you're better at, but also then to map out a plan. If you're the starting quarterback, you should probably take it in spring of junior year. If you have golf in the spring but nothing in the fall, like you want to study when you have time to study. Mm-hmm. But basically, your end zones are for SAT, ACT. If sophomore year is over and junior year is not, it's a great time to be taking the test. Now, this is where I get in trouble. So let me pause for a second. I get in trouble with a lot of high school guidance counselors because everyone has the right to their own opinion. But I'm looking at this from a ChooseFI angle. On August 1st, here we are, 11 days out. Gentlemen, start your engines. There are many schools that have rolling applications, and they start off on August 1st with this big pot of money to give away to all of the current rising seniors. And so a lot of schools are like, don't stress yourself out, enjoy life, and they don't encourage kids to have a plan that has them done by the June test. Any plan I design, you're done by the June test of the SAT, ACT of your junior year, because you want to have your stuff ticked and tied, ready to go if you are applying to those schools. Because when you're Tom Hanks on Castaway Island and there's this big bucket of money sitting right here on day one, it's a lot easier to be liberal and give out more. If you wait until the last day before the deadline, your application will still be accepted. But when you have just a little bit left, someone with the exact same stats might get a very, very different aid package. And so, you do need a lot of the people at your school to you need to be nice to them because it's basic customer service, but you do need to do your own research because a lot of times the advice that goes into the generic auditorium at your school is very, one size fits all, and ChooseFI is definitely a skewed community. And I mean that in a good way. There is something, I can give it to you for the show notes. One of my friends who is part of the ChooseFI, who's an awesome graphic designer, told me your blog post is really good, but it's also really ugly. Can I make you this? And so if you go to edisonprep.com/sophomore, it's a static link, and it just has the sort of candid, here's what sophomore parents should do to avoid bad things. And so I can give you that link, but it's don't stress when you hear people prepping for stuff in ninth grade. Stop it. Like I won't even touch. No, you're not allowed to tutor until after sophomore year is over. There, GPA and getting involved in some activities that you care about is what matters.
Okay. And just for anyone who is new, like say a new parent, maybe new to the country, you're not familiar with our education system, mm-hmm. ACT is scored out of what?
36.
And what is considered to be like a good to great score in an ACT?
It all depends. And it also and also athletics plays a role. Do yes. I have a student who got to play Stanford football with a 24? Maybe. Do I also have people with perfect scores every day that get rejected from Stanford? Also, yes. And so it's all relative to your GPA. Do you have a 95 mile per hour fastball? Other things. But 20.5 is the average on ACT, okay. And only one kid per classroom gets a 30. We call it the 10-20-30 rule. A 10 is what you get randomly guessing with the book closed, 20 national average, and a 30, one kid per room. A lot of the merit aid money does start in the high 20s or low 30s. The SAT, by analogy, about 1060-ish is the average.
What's the range?
It's out of 1,600. Okay. And 1060 is the average. Only 10% of kids get a 1,300 or higher. And a lot of the merit money does start in the high 1200s, but usually more like the 13s and above, depending on the school. Some schools, you would have no hope of even getting in with the 1,300. So it just depends on where all you're applying. But I do want to put one note, and I can give this to you for the show notes. Some of my colleagues in the industry gave me some crap for doing this, but it's important. So in the story, in episode 114 of ChooseFI, I told my story. My dad climbed telephone poles for a living, and I wasn't supposed to go to my fancy, expensive college. Now there are schools, I'll come back to Rice University in a second. Now there's these schools that give out lots of money as long as your parents have below what I consider to be a pretty ridiculously good income. But that's a different note for a second from now. But both my wife and I paid for all of college via these tests, room, board, tuition, et cetera. I'm not a college recruiter, athlete, et cetera. And so we're grateful. And so what I did, I wanted to pay it forward. I record, because not everyone can afford not everyone listening can afford to do prep. And prep doesn't have to be expensive if parents can monitor lightly or not so lightly that homework is occurring. It's commas, it's rectangles, it's putting in the repetition. Like we add structure and efficiency, but in the end, it's very practicable. But plenty of people self-practice. But I put together a podcast, I can give you the link, called Self-Prep, How to Self-Prep for the SAT, ACT, for a motivated kid. It wouldn't work for an unmotivated kid, but it would work for a motivated kid or parents who are willing to provide motivation. But it's a great thing because literally I went to Borders Books before they went bankrupt, and I bought a bunch of books and I went to the basement and I wailed away at them. And it was not an insane amount of time. It wasn't a 2-hour miracle, but it was not an insane amount of time. And that I'm happy to share that link, but it's a good one I recorded that, it would seem counter to my interest, but there's plenty of fish in the sea. And also this stuff just doesn't have to be that expensive if the kid cares, which, a lot of the work you do with financial literacy and also all the other things going on in the ChooseFI community, it's a great work.
I mean, we live in a society where we love to pay for things that we could have done ourselves, but we like the convenience of it. So yeah, just because you can do it yourself doesn't mean that people are going to do it. We like the support that comes with it. All right, Meagan, switching over to you. So now we've talked about the testing side of things. Thinking about student loans or financial aid, that sort of thing. What do we want to think about as we go into kind of filling out that FAFSA, thinking about maybe junior, senior year? Like, what are some of the factors that parents should be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think Brian hit it on the nose, talking about how FAFSA, it does look back. It's not a today kind of thing, except for assets at that point in time when you're completing FAFSA. But income, they look back to the most recently filed tax return or the year before. So it could be 2 years prior of income. And FAFSA, what that's looking for is that application is your financial information as the parents for undergrad and your child's financial information. Their information actually hurts them more than the parent. So sometimes that's an unknown fact that, if the kid has a job or if the kid has, a lot of money sitting in checking and savings, that's actually hurting them more on the calculations that they do for aid than it does that money being under the parent. There's a different calculation that goes into that.
So just to pause for a second, when you say hurting, like we're talking about the expected family contribution. So how much money that you are expected as the parent/child to chuck at your college education. So by hurting, we are reducing the amount of free aid available, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to clarify that. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, that was good. Good clarification. And so, in FAFSA, I think another misconception about that application is that it's for lower income individuals or poor families. And that's not the case. I do think everyone should be completing that before going to school, because there could be aid on the table. There could be a need for aid if, for whatever reason, we didn't think we needed it at first, but actually we do. So I think it's always a good practice to do that each and every year. When you go to graduate school, the parents' financial information is no longer relevant. The student is an independent student at that point in time, and it's based on their financial situation. So that's a little bit of a difference between undergrad and graduate school. Now, we talked a little bit about like how to save for college. So we talked a little bit about how to reduce the cost of college too, with grants and scholarships. Some other notes I thought I'd throw in would be also just kind of thinking about where we want to go to college. You want to compare the cost of attendance to wherever we're looking. And if we're going out of state, just know that cost of attendance is going to be a lot more. A lot of times double what the cost of attendance would be if you were a resident of that state. So that's something that's really important to know. It's not usually an apples to apples comparison between any school, but definitely not between an in-state school and an out-of-state school for someone. There are ways that you can reduce the cost of attendance. If you're going out of state, you can seek waivers based on financial need, or for those with families who are in public service or military service. There are also schools that have what's called like a state tuition exchange program, I believe is what they call it, or I think it's a tuition reciprocity. I can never say that word.
Yes.
Reciprocity agreements. Granted, numbers, not words. And so that's where just some states have partnered with other states to give discounted tuition offers to folks going between those two states. So that can be helpful too, to reduce the cost if we want to be going out of state. Now, other thoughts are looking into work study programs. And I like to talk about this a lot because I was also not someone who got a full ride to school. I wasn't in athletics. I wasn't also the smartest kid in my school. So I worked through college. I had actually a full-time job in my undergrad, which I know a lot of folks may not want to do or may not be able to do. But I think working at least part-time or looking at work study opportunities could be really advantageous, because not only are you helping subsidize the cost of school by potentially paying your way for some of the maybe living expenses or some of the tuition, but you're also gaining experience that's going to look really good on applications in the future compared to someone who has no work experience. So those are some thoughts on just some other things to maybe think about to reduce the cost of attendance.
Yeah, I wish Cody was here tonight, because he has some like really kind of creative ways to reduce the amount of money you need to borrow. So like ways to cash flow college, ways to reduce sticker price. So some of the ones that go for it.
Yeah, so there's two things that are under discussed, because a lot of times it can feel like if you read these websites, if your kid gets 1B or you don't have a perfect score on the SAT or ACT, then you're paying rack rate, sticker price, whatever, which is not true. But there's two things that are under discussed, and much like GPA and much like prior year FAFSA, it requires a little pre-planning. Now, not everyone has the right personality or the desire for what I'm about to suggest, but I was a resident advisor for 5 semesters, an RA, and every school gives you different levels of perks, but a lot of places, at a minimum, it's your room for free. A lot of places, it's room, board, free parking pass, other things too. And so you have to plan ahead, not get in trouble freshman year and be known for the wrong reasons with the residence life office, whatever. And it's a competitive process. I mean, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of fun, and they're respected leaders on campus at a lot of places. But yeah, I mean, I look at the time value of money of what that would be now invested versus spent on those 5 semesters room and board. It would have been, I mean, it's a ton. It's already a ton. And college is way more expensive right now than when we all went. So if your kid can vie for it and enjoys it, has the right personality for it, then it's a great thing. Side note, I'm an Eagle Scout, and I have a lot of students that we tutor that are Life Scouts, and their parents are browbeating them, please just finish the freaking Eagle project. It's a lot easier to get selected for resident advisor because you're seen as responsible, and like you can maybe do CPR if there's a crazy thing, whatever. But
it's that little piece of authority behind your name that like people assume you know what you're doing.
Because you follow through, but it's a good thing. Yes. The other thing, honestly, if your school has a med school attached to it, if your college has a med school attached to it, my buddy said, hey, look what I found. I'm like, this has got to be a misprint, because they pay you money from the lovely NIH grants, whatever. I got to play Sudoku and other games at their med school in an MRI machine. There's no radiation. It's just an MRI. And I got to play little games. I had to do Sudoku while listening to heavy metal versus classical versus jazz. And I got paid like $200 for a 45-minute scan, cash. Like, here's 2 $100 bills. And I was like, well, there's my social budget for like the next month. So it's stupid, but there's these well-funded grants at almost every med school, and they need the control group, which is healthy college kids, to compare against, somebody else. So it's stupid, but those exist.
Signing up for medical testing, or I did some sports science ones when I was in school. Like there was different ones for soccer players who were rehabbing from injuries and stuff like that. Yeah, look for these sorts of studies. See if they're PhD students or professors who are doing research and they need test subjects and they're willing to pay for it. One that Meagan talked about was work study, and I just want to clarify what that is. So work study is where the college is providing the employment. So they have some position in the school that they are hiring you to do, and it's with the understanding that pretty much this is a very low maintenance position that's going to have a lot of opportunity for you to study and do your schoolwork whilst doing this job. I used to work at a D3 college up in Rochester, New York, and our work study positions were things like monitoring the gym. So you're monitoring a gym of college students. Like there's not much monitoring to do. You just sit there and like you make sure that if something goes really wrong, you can call the right people. Or working the laundry. So you might toss something into the wash, turn it on, 30 minutes later, take it out, throw it in the dryer, turn it on. And like in the meantime, you're just studying, doing your work. Those are wonderful positions, and ask for those when you are applying. Or if you're going back to your college and saying, look, the numbers aren't working for me right now. Like maybe you're going back in March and you're saying, I know you've got a quota to fill of students. You might not have hit it yet. I really want to go there, but the numbers just aren't working for me. Can you find me something else like extra aid or work study opportunities? See what they come back to you with. It's a negotiation, and especially maybe not your Ivy League schools that are hitting their quotas and are oversubscribed, but these great schools that are maybe not getting their student quotas as much as they were, particularly in the years following COVID. Like there's some room for negotiation if you talk to their admissions offices. All right, we got a little under 10 minutes left. We got some questions. Steven, do you want to queue up some questions? I feel like you've been keeping an eye on them along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to cap off the last thing you said, right? Like something we'd love to say at ChooseFI is everything's negotiable, and really kind of taking that to heart. All right, there's a few. We're going back a little bit here, but we're gonna rapid fire these questions because we got quite a few good ones here. So I'm gonna post them up. We'll give a pretty solid but short answer, and then we'll move on. So. Question here talking about 529s from Danny. So if your child decides to go to trade school instead of college, do you pay that 10% penalty fee and taxes, or does a 529 now include trade schools too? So that you are able to pay for trade schools. Looking it up, it looks like any trade school that's a Title IV can receive Title IV scholarship money, which includes a lot of different stuff. So all kinds of things from cosmetology schools to culinary schools to all kinds of stuff. So there are some really good options out there that are not, like we said, traditional college expenses that can qualify for getting money out of your 529.
I'm so glad you looked it up in the background because I did not know the answer to that.
I had to look that up. I will say I had to look that up. I paused there to see if anybody else was going to jump in, and I said, no, we're gonna cover that one quick here. So this is a great one, right? We talked a lot about the FAFSA, and so either one of you guys that wants to answer this from Marilee, like what assets are counted for the parents? Like, let's just give a really quick 30, 45 seconds of like give them some places to go look about what assets they really should be thinking about.
I would say think about things that are liquid that you can access today or within the next couple days. So checking, savings, brokerage. That's really, I think, the major ones. Retirement is out of the picture. So 401k, anything with a 4 from your employer is not going to be included. IRA, Roth IRA, not included. That's an
equity in your home is usually not counted.
Right.
Do you know about cryptocurrency wallets?
That's a great question. That's like
I don't
a
know.
newer
I was just
thing.
thinking about that. I was like, does cryptocurrency count as a liquid asset when it comes to your FAFSA? Because it's going to be reported on the 2021 tax return. You have to now declare, did you have cryptocurrency earnings? But it's not on the 2019 one.
With how slow I think the government runs anyways, I don't think FAFSA is going to update for another 2 to 4 years. So I think you're okay for now.
And just one other side note, parents' assets count at a lower rate than student assets do. Do you know the numbers off the top of your head, the percentages?
I do not. The family contribution, like that math equation is very complicated, and it changes from year to year. So you can look that up to see the weight, but generally parents' assets are going to be weighted a little bit less than a child's assets.
And what we mean by that is, say, like if you have $100,000 sitting in a brokerage, savings account, all that stuff, FAFSA will expect you as the parent to contribute a percentage of that towards your kid's education. If the child has $5,000 in a savings account, they're expected to contribute a higher percentage of their assets towards their education. So I think kids, it could be like 20 something percent a lot of times, and parents it's down lower, maybe 5 or 6%. I really don't know my numbers off the top of my head. I should have looked those up beforehand. But yeah, parent assets counted at a lower percentage.
I was going to say one extra note there. So UTMAs, I see people run into problems with those. That's a Uniform Transfer to Minors Act accounts. It could be a savings account. It could be invested depending on where it's at. Those transfer ownership to the minor or to the child by age of majority for your state, which is usually around 18. So that is not a great savings bucket for school money, because that will immediately be under their name once they're completing FAFSA from year to year. So that's one note to just be cautious about. Commonly
known as a custodial account. So a custodial brokerage account or savings account will transfer to your kid. All right, Steve, what's next?
All right, so from Elizabeth, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not familiar with the net price calculator. I'm assuming this is some way that colleges try and kind of universalize like how much their total school cost would be. And so this is kind of an open-ended question. How accurate are the school's net price calculators, and should my child not even bother applying if the NPC comes back too high? Which obviously two questions in there. So let's tackle the first one kind of concretely. How accurate do we think those are? And then quickly talk about the second half of this of like, should we still consider it even if we think it's out of our range?
Do you want to jump on that one, Brian?
Yeah, so they're trying to. It's not perfect, but in an attempt to try and have some transparency and fewer surprises, the net price calculator is never perfect, but it gives you a directionally correct feeling. Because there are some schools, just because it says here's your family's expected financial contribution, doesn't mean the other school has the ability to pay the rest of it. A lot of schools do what they call gapping, which is, well, here's my need, but here's the aid I'm getting, and then you got to figure out a way, whether through Parent Plus loans or co-signed loans, to fill that gap. So gapping is a 4-letter word, not really, but is in this college process where sometimes people have I only have to pay 10 and your school costs at 70. Where'd the other oops go? And so that is one thing parents should look for. And then I will say, compared to when we started our business, a little over a decade ago, the NPCs have gotten way more prevalent, way more accurate, and it's not quite like a grocery label with the nutrition information being like crystal perfect, but it's good. There's relatively few surprises, and that's why you apply to a couple more schools. To your point earlier, Megan, I've had students. Now you have to be willing to not be bluffing in the poker game called college. I have a student who, and the reality was, World War III was happening in his house because this school that he loved and his second choice school, which he was fine with but didn't really want as nearly as much as this, the 4-year cost differential was going to be like $75K. And he called them and he said, listen, I want to come to your school. My dad says no. The difference is $75K. I've never faxed something. He goes, and he was just so cute. His mom told me the story. He goes, I don't know what a fax machine is. I'll fax it. I'll scan something. I'll do whatever. If we can meet halfway in the middle, my dad says yes, and I will fax you something right this second in like an hour saying yes. I'll sign whatever you want. Can you meet me halfway in the middle? And they, typity on the foot. They heard people typing this because they said, can you call back tomorrow morning? And they didn't meet him quite halfway, but real close. And I don't make, $35,000 per phone call like he does. So, and in the end, that was their best and final offer. But he came through as authentic, and it was a school that had a decent endowment. They had a little bit of fluff. It's not a school that has a mile-long wait list. It's a good school, and so he was super happy. And so he just said, worst they can say is no, and it really worked out. His case, $35,000 of after-tax savings for mom and dad / him, and the keyword after tax. Like that's just money you're not paying.
I think that one thing we haven't really touched on here tonight that I do think is important is, right, like having a directionally accurate and like this is well outside of our range. That is important information to kind of have a family conversation around, right? Like understanding what the ROI is. And we talk about this a lot with ChooseFI, right? And we haven't really touched on it tonight. Like, what is the ROI that you're expecting to get out of that school? You're investing in yourself, and what are you expecting to get out on the other end of that in terms of income? You can find out those things, Glassdoor, things like that. And how long is that payoff, right? Also, the cheapest way to save on college is to go to college for less years, right? Like there is no cheaper way than to just spend less years at an expensive school. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways to do that we've talked about across some of the ChooseFI podcast episodes that you can go to our website and search for, and things like taking 2 years at community college, making sure that those credits transfer. And a lot of states say, hey, if you go to 2 years, I know that Virginia is one of them. If you go to 2 years, then like we essentially will guarantee you, according to some criteria, access into our 4-year colleges. Jonathan, one of our co-founders, that is what he did, right? He came out as a pharmacist, and his first 2 years were done at community college. And that saved him probably more than any amount of scholarship or financial aid could have given them. And so there's some other options. So it's not a black and white, but if that net price calculator is really above your cut line in terms of like what you're capable of doing, then just start thinking out of the box, right? Start applying the ChooseFI way of figuring out a different way to solve that problem.
I mean, even just take the stat that the average 4-year degree student takes 5 years to complete that degree. Like, try and do your prep ahead of time in terms of thinking about the degree you want. Go test out, like go shadow some professionals and see like, oh, do I actually like this career or not before I start committing 4 years of my life to learning about it. A lot of students are going in, they're changing major. They're not able to complete college within 4 years. So they have to take a 5th year, which of course means more student loans. So at the very basic level, just complete college in 4 years if possible. Megan, I think you're about to open up, or Brian, sorry.
Yeah, and then there's also AP exams and CLEP, CLEB exams.
Oh my gosh, there's all of that we didn't even touch. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, the three big ones, and people who care can Google it, but it's been covered in a lot of different places on ChooseFI in the past. There's been 1 or 2 episodes that escape me. But AP exams, obviously take the exam, get the credit. CLEP exams, as well as dual enrollment. If your high school offers the ability to do that, check the fine print though, and make sure that the college you're hoping to go to most accepts, what the rules are for transferring in credits versus not, because some have caps or some have different rules. So definitely read that fine print. I did want to mention one thing, because I don't know if this will let me do this, but I can try to share something really quickly.
I have no idea. You can.
Let's see. Yes. So let's see if it does this. So here we go. This right here it's very hard. It's easy to say, is this showing up?
Yep.
Yeah, it's very easy to tell someone, just study really hard for these tests, honey, or get a good GPA, honey. This is Arizona. Arizona does it. Auburn does it. Alabama does it. Michigan State does it. I mean, there's hundreds of schools that have this, where it's very black and white and transparent. There's no playing footsie. It's if you get this GPA and this SAT, ACT, here's the money you get. And so what was awkward last year was some schools said, oh, you can apply test optional because COVID compassionate, whatever. Oh, but look at the merit A grade. Look at the right-hand column. Oh, well, that's a different number than the top left and the top right. And so some people, it's getting good grades and is about saving money and or getting to better schools or both. And that's useful. And I don't know, so people can always pause this in the video. Someone in the comments had asked about the links. This is a slide I use every day. So pretty much the only 4 links that I mentioned earlier when I was chatting, they can pause the video right here and then it's right.
Screenshot it now.
You can screenshot it or pause the video later and they're watching it, the replay. But yes, that's those 4 links I mentioned: how to self-prep, save yourself money, the original ChooseFI episode from way back, etc. So yeah, awesome. So that's useful.
Perfect. That was great. Okay, I'm just making sure my screens are good. So just before we wrap up, the one link I posted out there for all of you, it should be in the comment section of wherever you're watching, whether it's Facebook or YouTube. It's called the Nitro Score Calculator. This was given to me by Rocky Lavani, who's a friend of ChooseFI. Wonderful tool where you can use it to evaluate the ROI, Stephen was talking about, the return on your investment for a degree in a particular college. So you can say, I want to study education in, let's say, Mount St. Mary's University, which is the local one here for me. And it will tell you, okay, this is how much it will cost you to get that degree. Here's your expected salary after you have said degree, and what is that ratio? And if it's like $100,000 to earn a degree to earn $40,000 as a starting salary, that just does not make sense. It doesn't make financial sense. You're not going to get your return on your investment that you want. Versus there are schools where you could pay $250,000 for a degree, but you will come out with a $250,000 a year salary, and that is worth it in terms of ROI. So it's not a black and white, don't borrow more than this. I think rule of thumb we say, Stephen, at ChooseFI, is try to borrow less. So all of your student loans, borrow less than 1 year of expected starting salary for your career. Do Meagan or Brian, do you have any other rule of thumb that you follow in terms of how much student loans people should take if they need to take them?
Yeah, the 1 year rule is good. I think it's but you have to think about, if some people will go to a quote unquote lesser, hate that term, but a lesser school for undergrad, because if you're going to be pre-med and you have the same pot of money, it's using that money for med school would be a lot better idea. That's one thing to think about. If you're going to be going to grad school of any type, you might want to save the pennies for that.
Got it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think grad school has a different ball game for grad school, because you cannot be a doctor without going to medical school, and medical school is the most expensive. Medical students are the most indebted folks out there with student loan debt. So there's sometimes not a way around the cost of that education, and we have to get that degree to practice that profession. So I think when it comes to student loan planning, if we are pursuing that graduate route and our balance is going to be much greater than our potential future income in that first year or for the first couple of years, especially so residents or doctors can maybe mess up that rule of thumb, because their first 4 years of their career after graduating, they make very little because they're in residency for 4 years. They're making maybe 50, 60,000. that doesn't mean that their income isn't going to explode after that 4-year time frame. So they have a little bit of a different track. But when it comes to student loan planning, what we talk about a lot is if our balance is going to be much greater than our income in the future, then we should probably be treating the federal loans very passively. And this could probably be a whole other conversation.
Yes.
But I'll drop this here. Passively just means that we can take advantage of being on an income-driven plan and pursue a forgiveness timeline for our federal student loans. So mathematically, if our balance is going to be much greater than our annual income, that's the path we want to pursue, especially if we're going to be working in a public service setting. So there's a program out there called Public Service Loan Forgiveness that gets a lot of slack in the media, but it is a really good program if we check the boxes. So this is especially, so one occupation that came to mind was like social work. Social workers graduate with so much student loan debt from their graduate degree, and they don't make a ton of income, but that is a path of passion. You know, people don't go into social work for the money. So with that path, they could be considering public service loan forgiveness, to where we're not really thinking about the student loans as a debt anymore. We're thinking about them more like a tax on our income until we reap the benefit of that forgiveness. So I'll drop that little nugget there just on how we can plan for large student loan balances in the future. It's not a death sentence if we have to go to that school that costs X amount. There's always a way we can plan around the student loan situation.
I think we're going to have you back, or someone from Student Loan Planner back, to talk about this. Like, here's what happens after college, because this was all just the build up to it. We didn't even really get to talk much about like what happens in college. And then of course the after college is a whole conversation again. So yeah, we will certainly be reaching out at some point to try and do that. All right. Let's wrap this up because we have gone past the hour and we don't want to keep everyone on too long. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you all at home for joining us and for your questions. I know we did not get to all of those, but there's a lot of wisdom and experience in this group. So if you feel like you have an answer to a question in the comments, please feel free to throw your opinions in there. Just to preface it, sometimes say like, this is my opinion, this is my thought, this is my experience, and you know, people can take it or leave it. And we appreciate you contributing to the conversation. All right, Stephen, Megan, Brian, thank you so much for being here tonight. See you all very soon.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks.